Alright, we've got a lot to go over today. I have the Viseart Coyish Étendu palette in front of me. I did purchase this myself, but I have received PR from Viseart in the past. So these palettes are magnetic and the pans are 21mm square. You can mix and match them with the other Étendu palettes, the Petite Four, the newest Grand Pro, and the Face and Eye palettes, at least in the most recent collection. We're going to do some in-depth swatches, eye swatches, demo, comparison, and I'll let you know my overall first impressions. So let's go ahead and get into the shade by shade swatches and descriptions. Loyalty is described as a pearl peach with a pink duochromatic flip. So this to me is like a champagne nude with flips to pink and peach. It has a satiny finish and a bunch of very subtle pinprick sparkles dispersed throughout it. Honor is a magenta with a blue duochromatic flip. This is a shade that if you have a lot of Viseart palettes, you've seen this before. They do shades like this very often. Has a soft satin finish without any sparkles. Fortitude is described as a pink wisteria with a purple duochromatic flip. So this is an iridescent eyeshadow that looks white in the pan, but when you apply you see that pink and purple. I also see a soft shift to gold as well. Has some dispersed sparkles throughout it, but overall a soft sheeny finish. Courage is described as a peacock green with a pink duochromatic flip. So this to me is a very rich but desaturated emerald green. I don't see any duochromatic flip, but rather a ton of pink pinprick sparkles spread throughout it. Tenacity is described as a lilac with a blue duochromatic flip. This is the most textured and piecey shade in this palette. It's somewhat sheer, but it has the most high impact and sparkly finish of all shades in this palette. Still, I would say it's a small particle size, so nothing too textured. Constancy is described as a poppy red with a gold deep orange red duochromatic flip. This is like a true satin finish, and the duochromatic flip is not too bright, so you can still use it to add some depth to a look. More of a versatile shade that can almost be used in place of a matte. Prosperity is a lemon with a blue duochromatic flip. This is another one of those more textured and piecey shades. Has a sparkly finish and almost like a pearl reflect from straight on. While it does maintain that yellow base, it can be sheared out to this beautiful wash of sparkles as well. Harmony is an aquamarine with a gold duochromatic flip. This has a soft pearly sheen and you really see that gold duochromatic flip from straight on. This is another shade that seems to come up in a lot of Viseart palettes. If you have a large collection, you probably have something similar, if not a duplicate. Allegiance is described as a pink clematis with a creative duochromatic tint of iridescent kingfisher blue. This is like a salmon with a blue duochrome flip. Very shiny, high impact. This is a really nice shade. Not the first time we've seen this from Viseart, but it's pretty. Transformation is described as a purple with a blue duochromatic flip. This to me is like exactly the same as Allegiance that I just showed you, but instead of a salmon base, it's more of a rusty terracotta base. I'm not really seeing the purple, but feel free to disagree with me in the comments. Tranquility is described as a chartreuse lime green with a metallic finish. This has a very subtle gold flip to it, and this like specific shade of green reminds me of slime. Like that's all I think of when I see this. Okay, the last shade is called Abundance and is described as a pink bitten plum with a twinkle of duochromatic silver. So this is to me a warm purple with pinpricks of silver sparkle. Not seeing any duochromatic shift here. Okay, now that we've done the shade by shade swatches and descriptions, let's go ahead and get into the demo. I did 3 looks. For the first look, I'm taking the shade Loyalty on a tapered, somewhat dense brush and applying a wash of that all over my lid up into my crease. I love the more finely milled shades in this palette because you can pretty much use them in place of a matte, but you still maintain that like whimsical iridescent watercolor effect. So once I have a wash of that all over my lid, I'm going into the shade Constancy with a more dense blending brush, and sorry I'm a bit out of frame, but I'm going in my outer corner to add a little bit of depth, and then I'm bringing what's left on the brush down into my lower lash line, patting a little bit more on and blending it into that wash of Loyalty that I put down before to create a more seamless blend. Next, I'm going to go in with a pencil brush to allow for more precision of application, taking the shade Honor, and I'm applying that all over my lower lash line. Next, I'm taking that same pencil brush, going into the shade Tenacity, and I'm going to start putting that in my inner corner and then diffusing inward. If you use a less dense brush, I would recommend either spraying it or using a tacky base, because this is a more piecey textured shade and you'll get some fallout. Here's the final look. I really like the combination of those soft purples with the like poppy orange red. For the second look, I'm taking the shade Harmony with a blending brush and I'm applying a wash of that into my crease as kind of like the starting point of my look. Then I'm going in with a flat shading brush with the shade Tranquility and applying that on the outer third of my lid. I normally don't like greens like this, but I wanted to challenge myself to use it. Then with that same flat shading brush, I'm going into the shade Courage and I'm applying it on my outer corner to add some depth to the look. I'm first stamping it on, and then as there's less product in the brush, I'm blending it in. Then I'm going in on my lower lash line when there's even less product left on the brush. Then with that same flat brush with no product left on it, I'm going into the shade Prosperity, and I was applying it initially as just an inner corner shade, but I ended up really liking how it looked, so I brought it even further into the inner third of my lid. Then I just used my finger to blend them together. That's why I love how user-friendly these shades are. Brought it down to my lower lash line and blended it into Courage. And here's the final look. Ignore that mascara smudge. I'm just now seeing that and cringing inside. Okay, for the last look, I wanted to do something simple and wearable because this is a look I ended up wearing for the full day. Started with the shade Transformation with that flat shading brush, and I stamped it onto my outer corner and then kind of started to diffuse along the edges. Then I went into the same shade Transformation with a pencil brush and I started to apply it on my inner corner, going for a halo eye situation here. So once I got that applied to my inner third of my lid, I took what was left over on the brush and brought it down to that same part of my lower lash line to mirror what it looked like on the top. Then I swirled my finger into the shade Allegiance and just popped that on the very center of my lid. I felt like it blended seamlessly into Transformation because they have that same duochromatic flip, just different bases. And here's the final look. I really loved how it looked in person and it wore throughout the day beautifully. So now that we've done the demo, let's get into the comparisons. So the comparisons portion is the last set of B-roll footage that I filmed for this video. And when I was finding comparisons in my other Viseart palettes, I did start to get a little bit annoyed. Actually pretty annoyed on behalf of consumers. Almost half of the shades in this palette are actual duplicates of shades in palettes they just sent me in PR in the Fleurette Face and Eye palettes and the Flower Lotus collection. I do think it's pretty deceptive that Viseart is including literal duplicate shades in palettes that were released in the exact same time period and naming them different things. As a consumer, you can't really tell from the website that they're duplicates. I had no idea until I got this palette in person. I started to swatch it and I was like, this looks familiar. This looks familiar too. And I know some other brands do this, but they'll at least keep the names the same so you can kind of pick up on it if there is a duplicate. I really don't like that Viseart does this. I still love the brand, but I hope they'll consider changing this in the future. If you do insist on including duplicate shades in the same palettes, keep the names the same. That way the consumer can do their own research and decide whether they want to pick up the palette, knowing that there is a duplicate of something they may already have. But anyway, now that I've talked your ear off about that, let's go ahead and get into the comparisons. Okay, so I figured most people would be curious to see how the Coyish palette compares to the original Koi palette. This Petite Shimmer Koi is a carbon copy of the shades that come in the original Slim Pro of the Koi palette that's now discontinued. So the overall essence and effect between the two palettes is very similar. They all have these soft watercolor duochrome shades. While there are no actual duplicates, there are quite similar shades, and I will go over those in the next portion of these comparisons where I do shade by shade comparisons. The main difference between the two palettes, besides obviously the pan size, is that there are a few more high impact shades in the Coyish Étendu palette, which I indicated earlier when I was going through shade by shade describing them, but otherwise they are very similar in the effects and finishes. Okay, so for the first group of comparisons, I'm going to have labels up on the screen the entire time I go through these, so feel free to screenshot at any point for future reference. So the first group, we have Jezebel from the Violette Étendu palette, Hanami from the Sakura Lotus Quad, Petite Four Quad, and then Honor from the Coyish Étendu palette. These are all magentas with a blue duochromatic flip. Jezebel is exactly the same in tone, but it has a more sparkly, high impact finish. Hanami and Honor are duplicates. They are indistinguishable. Next, we have Devoted from the Viseart Coyish Face and Eye palette versus Loyalty from the Coyish Étendu. Again, these are duplicates, exact same tones, duochromatic shift, texture, and finish, but they do have different names. By the way, just for full transparency, anything I denoted with an asterisk I did receive in PR from Viseart, probably the first and last time they send me gifted products if they see this video. Next, we have Lotus from the Petite Koi palette versus Tenacity from the Coyish Étendu. As you can see, these are quite similar in tone and depth, but the texture is different. Tenacity is a lot more of a piecey, sparkly, high-impact finish. Next, we have Wink from the Viseart Étendu palette, Jin from the Petite Koi palette, Taiko from the Petite Koi palette, Whirling from the Sakura Lotus palette, and then Fortitude from the Coyish Étendu palette. Wink and Jin are duplicates of each other, but they have this like very soft teal base. Taiko is similar to Fortitude, but it's a little bit more dimensional. And then Whirling is a duplicate of Fortitude. They're all really similar in that they have this like iridescence with this pink to gold and purple shift. Taiko, Whirling, and Fortitude are true iridescence in that they look white in the pan and they have that sheer base, whereas the other two have that very soft teal base. Next, we have Kakai from the Petite Koi palette versus Prosperity from the Coyish Étendu palette. Not only is the tone of yellow different in Kakai, but it also has a quite different finish. It's more of a satin finish with some sparkle, but not very reflective, whereas Prosperity is more of a lemon lighter yellow, and it's very reflective and sparkly. Also, Prosperity has that blue duochromatic flip, where Kakai does not. Next, we have Sakura and Koi from the Petite Koi palette versus Constancy from the Coyish Étendu palette. So Sakura is similar in the finish and opacity compared to Constancy, but it's much cooler tone. It's more of like a coral red versus the true orange of Constancy. Koi is more of like a pearly reflective finish, and it's lighter than Constancy. Also, Sakura feels a lot drier to the touch, whereas Constancy feels like a more smooth, true satin. Okay, here we have Coquetry from the Viseart Amour Face and Eye palette versus Transformation from the Coyish Étendu. These both have like a blue, icy duochromatic flip, but Coquetry is a very soft taupe base, whereas Transformation is more of a like terracotta reddened base, but it's described as a purple. Next, we have Idyllic from the Viseart Bisou Face and Eye palette versus Allegiance from the Coyish Étendu palette. These are indistinguishable in every aspect. I believe they are duplicate shades. Then we have Kamakura from the Petite Koi palette versus Pagoda from the Sakura Lotus Petite 4 Quad versus Harmony from the Coyish Étendu palette. Pagoda and Harmony are exact duplicates, and then Kamakura is very similar in that it has that soft gold duochromatic flip, but as you can see, it's more of a true green, whereas the other two are more of an aqua / teal base with that gold flip. Very similar finish and texture. Okay, in the last group, none of these are duplicates, but I thought comparing them could be helpful to contextualize or tell what the Coyish shades will look like in real life. So we have Violette from the Viseart Étendu palette, Murasaki from the Petite Koi versus Abundance from the Coyish Étendu palette. These are all deepened purples. Murasaki is cooler toned and more dimensional than Abundance, and then Violette is a lot cooler toned and deeper. It's also more dimensional with a ton of different colored pinpricks of sparkles. Then we have Midori from the Petite Koi palette versus Tranquility from the Coyish Étendu palette. Midori is more of an olive with a gold sheen to it, whereas Tranquility is what I described as like a slime colored green. Like it has a lot more saturation to it, and it's more of a true green, but it does also have that slight gold sheen. Hopefully that was helpful. I'm sure there's more overlap with other Viseart palettes, but these are the only ones I have with shimmers to reference. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope you liked it. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel if you're not already. And other than that, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.